5 kids from a Texas high school hallway turned their voices into one of the biggest musical stories of the decade. Grammys. Sold out arenas. Billions of views. From the outside, Pentatonix looks like a fairy tale that never stopped going up. But underneath the perfect harmonies was a group of young people quietly falling apart, one member at a time, and almost nobody noticed until it was too late. This is the real story of what fame cost them, and why one member had to walk away just to survive. It started small, the way most big things do. At Martin High School in Arlington, Texas, 3 teenagers found each other almost by accident. Scott Hoying had the kind of presence that made a room lean in, the type of person who felt music instead of just performing it. Kirsten Maldonado had a voice that felt warm even when the song was sad, a tone that could carry an entire room without ever sounding forced. And Mitch Grassi could hit notes that made people stop scrolling and start listening, a range and a flair for performance that set him apart from almost everyone around him. None of them fit the usual high school mold. They were too loud, too different, too into music to blend in with everyone else. So they found each other instead. And in doing that, they found something that felt a lot like relief. Their first real shot came from a radio contest with a prize most teenagers would kill for, a chance to meet the cast of Glee. They recorded a cover just to enter. They lost. But something strange happened. People who heard that cover couldn't stop talking about it. That tiny loss planted a seed none of them could see yet, a quiet proof that what they had together actually meant something to other people, not just to each other. Years passed. Scott left for college and joined a respected college a cappella group, sharpening his skills alongside singers who took the craft seriously. But even surrounded by talented new people, he never stopped thinking about Mitch and Kirsten and the specific kind of magic the 3 of them made when they sang together. When NBC's singing competition, The Sing-Off, opened auditions for a 5-person group, Scott knew exactly who he wanted beside him. There was just one problem. He only had 2 people, and the show needed 5. That's when 2 strangers changed everything. Avi Kaplan showed up with a bass voice so deep it felt like it shook the floor beneath him, the kind of sound that didn't just fill a room, but gave every other voice something solid to stand on. Kevin Olusala showed up doing something nobody had ever seen before, playing the cello and beatboxing at the exact same time, a skill so strange and impressive that it instantly made people pay attention. 5 people. One single day together before their audition. That's all the time they had to become a group that could stand in front of judges and convince them they belonged there. It shouldn't have worked. Groups that barely know each other don't usually walk on stage and sound like they've been singing together for years. But the second they opened their mouths together, something clicked into place that felt bigger than any of them individually. They didn't just sing songs, they rebuilt them from the ground up, turning familiar pop hits into something that felt brand new. Week after week, they crushed the competition, taking risks other groups were too afraid to try. And when they won Season 3 in 2011, it felt like the beginning of something unstoppable. Except real life doesn't care about fairy tale endings. Winning a singing show didn't come with a manual. No record label knew what to do with an a cappella group, no matter how talented they were. Just months after signing with Epic Records, Pentatonix got dropped, cut loose, left to figure it out on their own, with no real plan and no guarantee anyone outside the show would still care about them a year later. For most groups, that would be the end of the story. Instead, it became the beginning of the real one. With nothing left to lose, the 5 of them turned to YouTube, uploading covers from a small apartment with nothing but a camera and raw talent. Their version of Somebody That I Used to Know exploded. Video after video pulled in millions of views. They built an entire fan base, the Pentatonix, completely from scratch, without a single label behind them, without a marketing budget, without anyone telling them what to do next. But here's the part most fans never think about. When you go from unknown to famous almost overnight, the pressure doesn't slow down, it multiplies. Every video had to beat the last one. Every performance had to be flawless. Every arrangement had to sound tighter and more impressive than the one before it. What started as 5 friends messing around with harmonies turned into a machine that never stopped running. And a machine like that doesn't care whose shoulders it's crushing. It just keeps demanding more. Scott felt the weight of holding the group together, handling the direction, the branding, the constant decisions that came with being the face people looked to whenever something needed sorting out. He was the one fans expected to speak up in interviews, the one label executives called first, the one who had to smile through exhaustion because the group's image depended on it. Kirsten, the only woman in the group, felt a different pressure entirely. The pressure to prove she belonged in a lineup where everyone assumed the men were carrying the sound, and the added weight of being scrutinized in a way her bandmates simply weren't. Mitch, magnetic on stage, was quietly wrestling with who he actually was underneath the spotlight, caught between the version of himself that felt safe to show the world and the version that felt real. Kevin was trying to balance his faith and his family life with a schedule that barely left room to breathe, flying from city to city while trying to hold onto the parts of himself that had nothing to do with performing. And then there was Avi. To fans, he looked like the calm one, the steady one, the deep voice that anchored every song and gave the group its sense of grounding. What almost nobody realized was that Avi was the one struggling the most, and he was doing it in complete silence, the same way people who seem the strongest often are. Avi never wanted fame. He wanted music, but the kind that felt honest, not the kind wrapped in flights, hotel rooms, and back-to-back photo shoots. He had grown up loving the outdoors, loving quiet, loving the kind of stillness that doesn't exist when you're famous. Every tour meant more time away from the parts of his life that actually made him feel like himself, more nights in unfamiliar cities, more mornings waking up unsure what day it even was. He loved his bandmates. That part was never in question. But the noise around the music, the constant motion, the never-ending demand to perform a version of himself for cameras, it was wearing him down piece by piece, the way water slowly wears down stone. Fans could see he was quieter than the others, that he smiled less in photos, that he seemed to hang back during interviews. They just didn't know how deep that quiet ran, or how long he had been carrying it without telling anyone the full truth. By 2017, Avi had reached a point he couldn't push past anymore. He recorded a farewell video with his voice audibly shaking, and what he said broke millions of hearts at once. There was no fight, no scandal, no drama to point to. He simply admitted that being away from his family and unable to make the kind of music that felt true to him had become too much to carry. He wasn't angry at the group. He wasn't angry at fame itself. He was just tired in a way that no amount of success could fix. That kind of honesty is rare in an industry built on keeping up appearances, and it's exactly why it hits so hard, because it wasn't a story about betrayal. It was a story about a person finally choosing himself. For a lot of fans, Avi wasn't just a member of the group, he was the soul of it. His exit didn't just change the sound of Pentatonix. It cracked something open in the fanbase, a wave of grief and disbelief that lingered for months, filling comment sections and fan forums with people trying to process the loss of someone they felt like they knew personally. And the remaining 4 members were left facing a question none of them had an answer to. Could Pentatonix even survive without him? They found Matt Salih, a talented bass singer with a warm tone and genuine humility. On paper, he checked every box, technically skilled, easy to work with, respectful of what the group had already built. But stepping into a spot that fans were still mourning is not a simple transition, no matter how talented you are. Matt didn't try to become Avi. He didn't imitate his style or pretend nothing had changed. He slowly earned his own place, one performance at a time, absorbing the weight of expectation without letting it crush him, until he stopped being the new guy and started being family. But even as the group kept touring, kept releasing music, kept winning awards, something under the surface had shifted permanently. Avi's departure wasn't just the loss of a member. It was proof that even the most successful, most talented people in the world can hit a wall that fame cannot fix. It exposed the truth that a group built on perfect harmony was made up of very human people, each one carrying weight the audience never saw, each one bad year away from their own breaking point. Then, in 2020, the entire world stopped, and for the first time in almost a decade, so did Pentatonix. Tours got canceled. Studios shut down. The non-stop machine that had defined their entire adult lives suddenly had nowhere to go. The pandemic forced Scott to slow down after years of nonstop momentum, and in that silence, he was finally alone with questions he had buried for years, questions about identity, about mental health, about who he actually was underneath the role he had been playing for so long. Around this time, his relationship with his partner Mark deepened, eventually leading to marriage in 2023, a moment of real joy and stability after years of constant motion. But in interviews afterward, Scott admitted something fans rarely hear from someone who always looked so composed. The years of leading the group had left him more drained than he ever let on, and the forced stillness of the pandemic was the first real chance he'd had to feel that exhaustion instead of just pushing through it. Mitch used that same forced stillness to explore a side of himself he had kept hidden for years, launching a solo project called Mesa that let him experiment with a darker, more personal sound, one that had nothing to do with the polished image Pentatonix required. It was freeing, but it was also terrifying in a different way, because showing people your real self is a much bigger risk than performing a character other people already love. Fans who had only known the confident, playful version of Mitch got to see something raw, and that vulnerability became one of the most talked about transformations to come out of the group's quiet years. Kirsten finally got space to breathe outside the group dynamic, using the break to release solo music shaped by her own experiences with heartbreak and self-worth. For years, she had been the emotional glue holding tension together behind the scenes, the one who smoothed things over when four strong personalities clashed under pressure. Now she was learning what it felt like to stand on her own, to be seen as an artist first instead of the group's one female member, expected to keep the peace. She began speaking more openly in interviews about what it had actually felt like to carry that invisible responsibility for so many years, and fans responded to that honesty in a way that surprised even her. Kevin's biggest transformation had nothing to do with music at all. Becoming a father completely reordered his priorities in a way nothing else ever had. The touring lifestyle that once excited him suddenly felt disconnected from the quiet, grounded life he wanted to build for his family. Long flights that used to feel exciting now felt like time stolen from his kids. His solo album became a reflection of that shift, a search for meaning beyond the stage lights, filled with the kind of spiritual reflection that only comes from stepping back and re-evaluating everything you thought you wanted. Each of them was breaking apart and rebuilding at the same time, and somehow, that's what brought them back together stronger. Their sound today isn't just technically impressive. It's shaped by real loss, real growth, and real people who almost lost themselves trying to stay perfect for an audience that never saw the cost. The years of forced silence during the pandemic did something touring schedules never could. They gave 5 extremely famous people the rare chance to just be regular people again, even if only for a little while. So where does that leave them now? Pentatonix still sells out world tours. Their holiday specials are still a tradition for millions of families every year. Their harmonies are still flawless, maybe even sharper than they were a decade ago. But the group standing on stage today is not the same group that won the Sing-Off back in 2011. They've buried a version of themselves that chased perfection at any cost, and replaced it with something more honest, more protective of their own well-being, and far more human. Scott leads with more vulnerability, now instead of fear, openly discussing the mental toll of leadership in a way the old, image-obsessed version of the group never would have allowed. Mitch keeps pushing his own artistic boundaries without apology, treating his solo work not as a side project, but as a real extension of who he is. Kirsten has fully stepped into her own voice, both literally and figuratively, no longer content to just be the group's one steady female presence. Kevin found a sense of peace fatherhood gave him that fame never could, and he talks about that peace as openly as he once talked about his music. And Matt, once the outsider walking into an impossible situation, became proof that healing after loss is actually possible, that a group everyone assumed was permanently broken could put itself back together with someone new standing in the gap. As for Avi, walking away wasn't the tragedy people assumed it was at the time. It was the thing that saved him. He's still making music today, just on his own terms, the kind of honest, grounded music he always wanted to make in the first place. filled with the folk influences and quiet spirituality that fame never let him fully explore. Fans who once mourned his exit have slowly come to understand it for what it actually was, not abandonment, but survival. The real story of Pentatonix was never about scandal or falling out. It was about 5, then 6, young people trying to survive an industry that demands perfection while quietly destroying the people who deliver it. Their harmony was never really about hitting the right notes. It was about surviving long enough to keep singing at all, about finding a way to stay true to themselves while an entire industry tried to turn them into a product. So here's the question worth sitting with. Was Avi's exit the biggest loss in Pentatonix history? Or was it actually the moment that saved the group from falling apart completely? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know which side you're on. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more of these hidden celebrity stories coming.